Governor Walker, thank you very much for your time to accept our invitation request. I really appreciate your time today.
Well, it's my honor, my pleasure to be here. Well, I'm here because as governor, and as I've lived in Alaska, I was born in Alaska. You know, Asia is our number one customer for our natural resources, whether it's fish, whether it's timber, whether it's coal, whether it's LNG, natural gas. So it's very important for me to be here as many times as I can, because this is our customer base right here. Well, we've been selling coal to Korea for a long, long time out of Usabeli coal in the interior of Alaska. So that's been some of our infrastructure in Alaska was built in Seward specifically for that. It's taken by rail to Seward and put on a ship to come over. We've been doing that for a long, long time. So we've been shipping timber into Asia, and of course LNG. We've been shipping that into Japan since 1969. So we see some great opportunities of our relationship with Korea, and as far as on an energy basis. First trip to Seoul, I looked out. This is probably maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. I looked out at this incredible population. I said, you know, we have all these resources in Alaska, but we have very little population. Our population is about 750,000 people, and it's just not enough for us to develop our resources. Our resources are about 700 to 800 miles away from the major population area. We need a population for it to work, and so we have a lot of energy, small population. Korea has a very large population, small amount of energy. It's a natural fit for the two.
Speaking of connecting to supply and demand of natural resources, another aspect, there has been some discussion and debate, increasing one even during the forum, that this Northwest Passage is very promising alternative. What's your view on that?
Well, we know what's happening. We see the results of that. We've had some of our villages up north, Kivalina, and others are flooding as a result of that, and the beaches are washing away because the ice pack is not there as it used to be to sort of protect the beaches, but not. So we're seeing a lot more shipping through the Northwest Passage, the Arctic waterway. So it's it's not a theory. We're seeing it happen now. This year, for the first time, a cruise ship left Seward, Alaska, where the coal ships used to come to Korea from. Left Seward, Alaska, and went around to New York by going through the passage. And a friend of mine was on that voyage, Ed Rasmussen, and he sent the message home where we're continuing to look for ice. The concern was there'd be too much ice, and they couldn't find some. So it's definitely happening, and certainly in about 4 months a year now. It's projected that will increase to about 6 months a year in 2020 and 2030. Some projected it'd be open year round. So it's happening.
And speaking of Arctic passage and opportunities from Arctic, the U.S. is the chair country at the moment for the Arctic Council. You may know very well. But at the same time, there are many issues that needs to be clarified and agreed, especially between Russia and U.S. And there has been some technical discussion at the technical level. And when we talk to global experts from both Russia and U.S., they said there's a very clear spirit of cooperation. But when it reaches to the decision floor, i.e. your level, there seems to be different air floating around.
Well, that's correct. You know, the United States is considered an Arctic nation because of Alaska. If it wasn't for Alaska, there would not be an Arctic nation. So we've been very, very involved in that. In fact, I put in my cabinet, the first governor to have a cabinet position of Arctic Policy Advisor. I recently moved that position to Washington, D.C. because while the Arctic was in Alaska, the policy was in Washington, D.C. So he was flying back and forth. So he's now in Washington, D.C. And so we have been very involved in all those meetings. We've been involved in our delegation in Washington. We believe has secured funding for an ice-breaking tug to be stationed up in the Arctic. We're looking at some port development, Port Clarence, and also at Nome. as far as some port development to be able to have infrastructure available. Our concern is that once it starts to be used, if there's not infrastructure and there's a problem, we're going to be impacted by it. And so we want to make sure that there's infrastructure available to for a disabled vessel, any sort of problems that might take place.
Despite your good intention and willingness to increase the cooperation between Alaska, state of Alaska, and countries in East Asia, I think we are yet to see substantial progress. That means, as it goes, it takes two sides to tango.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some recommendations for countries in East Asia? What do you see as some of the obstacles?
Well, I would I'll look at it a little bit differently. I look at what are the opportunities, and then I'll look at the obstacles. The opportunities are to be able to bring the gas that we've been re-injecting. We re-inject back in the ground gas that comes out of the ground with the oil every day up in it's called Prudhoe Bay. Mm-hmm. Oil comes up, gas comes with it, no gas line, so the gas is taken off, put back in the ground. The amount that's put back in the ground is approximately twice what's consumed in South Korea. Very large volume is put back in the ground. This isn't shale gas you're going to go out and try to find. This is gas that we've been doing this for 40 years. So now we recently have gotten the authority that can now go to the market. Before it couldn't, because it was helping to pressurize the oil and get more oil out. The oil fields have matured. It's now time to bring that out. So we think, and we, as I said earlier, we can't use it ourselves without having customers. So that's a very good opportunity to emphasize and strengthen our trade relations with Korea as a result of that. And also, because we own it, as I said, it can be a government-to-government discussion, and that's going to be a very different discussion than it would otherwise be. So I'm very excited about that. Now, the potential obstacles would be if there was any sort of preclusion of exports and those kinds of things, and that just hasn't been a problem historically. Again, our biggest customers is Asia for the fish, timber, coal, and natural gas.
I think some, if not all, policymakers in South Korea see Alaska as a very important state, one of the states in U.S., along with those states in the west coastline.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, New York, Washington, politically, economically important,
sure.
But culturally, large number of Korean American lives and be living as American citizens, but still carry the heritage as a Korean. And Alaska, in one of the surveys I've seen a few months back, is one of the top states that the prospective Korean immigrants wants to go. It used to be California only.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
In the past. I guess they see what happened. California is quite mature, it's kind of full, and they see Alaska as a future place for starting their second life.
Well, we are very proud of our relationship with Korea. We have Alaska is proud to say we have 8,000 in Alaska. The Korean community is very active in Alaska, a very prominent part of our community. We have our own Korean newspaper in Anchorage. The very first person that I hired when I became governor was my communications director. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing you do is you get a communication director. She is born in Busan, Grace Jang, and she's been a tremendous part of our administration in many, many respects. So we are very pleased with our Anchorage in Alaska is one of the most diverse areas in the world. We have in our high school system in Anchorage, we have 95 languages are spoken, and
wow.
the top 20 most diverse elementary schools in America. The first 19 are in Anchorage, and the 20th one is in Hawaii. So we really are a very diverse community in Alaska, and we're very proud of that. We celebrate that. So but our Korean community in Alaska is very, very meaningful and very much a part of what we do in Alaska.
Let me go back to the energy issue. You may know that Korea has sour history of paying one of the highest price of gas in the history.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think lawmakers or policymakers rather intended to pay the highest price in the world at that time. But lo and behold, that's what we have done. And there has been a lot of criticism. I don't think we are ready to make a long-term commitment in terms of fixing the price. My impression and understanding from you is that Alaska is offering a long-term commitment of pricing. How do you think we will resolve these different views?
Well, I think it's going to be resolved by sitting down and having over a cup of tea and having a discussion about it, because we have been paying a very high premium as well. I know there's the term an Asian premium. Well, there's also a term we use called the Alaskan premium, because many times we're paying significantly higher than being paid in Asia. What we want to do is we want to take the volatility out of the pricing of energy. You know, it's been going up and down, very, you know, peaks and valleys, and it's very difficult on our economy to do that. It's very difficult on our consumers in Alaska, and suddenly their energy costs are doubled or tripled because the price of oil went up or went down. That's we want to stop that. We want to get away from that. And because we have this opportunity with all this resource that's available, you know, we don't have to go out and try to figure out, are we going to find it? What's the cost of exploring? There's no cost of it. All this gas has been found sort of by mistake while people were looking for oil. And while looking for oil, they found gas, no gas line, just putting it back in the ground. So we know there's hundreds of trillions of cubic feet up in Alaska because no one's ever looked for gas, because why would you without the infrastructure? So the exciting thing for me is that we can blend this need, and I've been hearing about it at this conference, and I get you know, pretty excited hearing this discussion about taking the volatility out of oil, the long-term supply, dependable prices, not tied to some index related to somebody else. How about an index tied to, you know, Korea and Alaska? How about that index? How about that? That's what we should be looking at. So I really see an incredible opportunity of need and also infrastructure that, you know, now that Alaska is in the lead on our project, which we are. There's probably been at least $600 million, if not more, already spent on the project in the engineering, pre-feed, those kinds of things. The route is selected. You know, 98% of the land is on either federal land or state land. That's not an issue. You know, it's our cold temperature is finally our good friend. And you know, because you're trying to make something cold in Alaska, it's already got a low temperature, much more efficient. And we've been doing this since 1969. I mean, we've been shipping LNG out of Alaska since 1969 from a little different source, but from the same terminal location in the Nikiski and the Kenai Peninsula. So I see that as really, you know, someone said recently at the conference, I think yesterday, I have it in my notes, we need one good example of a win, you know, in this gathering of Northeast Asian countries, and I consider Alaska a country a little bit, and I certainly feel like we're part of that. So I think that's the win, is to be able to provide long-term, stable price energy, not tied to some index unrelated to what goes on in Korea or in Alaska. So I would be just thrilled if we could put those pieces together to provide that stable source of energy.
I think that's very promising. An impressive, very persuasive argument that Alaskan gas will be very, very lucrative. Not necessarily lucrative, I take the word back. Will be very, very a good way of establishing partnership between East and West, or Alaska and Eastern countries. Let me throw at you a more sensitive question. How about Russian gas? They're as eager as you are to sell their gas to East Asian countries. Can that be a force of competition, or is there any way to have a more cooperation?
Well, a couple of things I should mention also is our proximity. We're only probably 8 days away from 8 or 9 days away in shipping. Some other locations are much further. Russia is certainly close by as well. And you know, I don't typically, you know, advance our project by necessarily being negative about somebody else's project, but I would say that our rule of law is such that it's a very stable. Again, 42 years of on-time deliveries from Alaska to the Asian market, and so we have that 5-star rating, if you will, as far as reputation, history. So I think that you know, and I think that there's room for everybody. I don't think it necessarily means nobody's you know, energy gets developed. I've been listening to their discussions while here about their need for development, and I certainly understand that as well. So it's I'm not sure it's an either or scenario, but our because of our unique ownership and unique structure, we can invite companies that want to be involved in the liquefaction, that want to be involved in the pipeline, piece of it, or in the upstream, that want to explore and look for gas themselves, and do more of a direct, where the country owns the resource. We have Repsol up, and we have Italy there with Eni. We have different international explorers in Alaska. Alaska is just a tremendous amount of land and an opportunity. We just need the infrastructure to open that up.
Some bold scholars or thinker at one point argued that gas in Alaska, U.S. and Alaska in particular, I guess, and the gas supply in Russia, in particular the Far East, i.e. Vladivostok and above, shouldn't be a source of conflict. Rather, it should become a source of cooperation. He suggests that U.S. and Russia use the same pipeline by bringing your gas through LNG ship to one of the tank city, the city which has enormous storage capacity, and using the existing network of gas pipeline that connects Japan through Sakhalin and all the islands in Japan, and China and Far East China, all the way going down to Beijing and Shanghai, and all the other cities in between, and of course cutting through the Korean Peninsula, rather than having a multiple transportation system with a different flag. Are you open to that kind of international cooperation? Should international politics permit?
Well, of course. We were interested in we saw there was an interest of there being a trading hub, major trading hub in Korea for LNG, a regional hub. And I know that I was in Singapore last month, and I'm in Japan next month. And so I know that each region has talked about having a trading hub of some sort. So I think that makes an abundance of sense. I really do. In our situation, we need the pipeline to bring it down to an ice-free port. And also, when it comes to Alaska, it'll open up a whole lot of opportunities on mining opportunities. In Australia, the biggest beneficiary of the development there has been the mining industry. And in Alaska, we are second to none in the amount of minerals in the ground, whether it's copper, whether it's zinc, whether it's gold. Our biggest challenge is the cost of energy. So we bring down the cost of energy. Our state, which is very closely associated with Korea, is suddenly in a very different development mode.
I think that's excellent perspective, and we are very happy to hear that you, as the governor of Alaska, is so keen to develop stronger tie with Asian countries, including Korea. And I think this is a way to start a long journey of being a really one global East Asian or Asian. I count Alaska as one of the Asian state, if not country. And it was very impressive to hear last time when I met you that if you look at the globe from the top, Alaska belongs to Asia.
Exactly.
That has resonated very, very profoundly in my mind. And our institute will do our best, and the lawmakers you met today show very strong interest to establish cooperation.
One of the quotes that I like so much that I use often, and when I speak in the United States and mostly in Alaska, that I learned in Korea, is that once you start something, you're halfway done. And boy, that is so true. And that's something that it brings a smile to a lot of Alaskans, because we sometimes tend to study things, and then we study the studies of the studies of the studies. And when I ran for governor, this was the main issue I ran on was opening up our resources and bringing them to the Asian market. And so I said I would dismiss study hall, and we would go to work. And so I probably traveled to Korea 6 or 8 times before I ran for governor, and met with with KOGAS, with East West Power, with SK, GS, POSCO, and talking about this opportunity. So once I sat with those companies and listened to their level of interest, I knew this was possible. So that was one of the things that motivated me to run for governor. I don't have a lot of patience to sit back and hope something has happened. I want to roll up our sleeves and go to work and make it happen.
All right. Thank you very much. Before we close, I'd like to see whether you have any last word to the audience in Korea who will see this interview in 2017, or at least 2017.
Well, I would just say thank you for all that you've accomplished. All the we were in Busan last month. I had not been there before. Absolutely a beautiful, beautiful location. I've been so impressed every time I've come to Korea. The work ethic. I've been treated so professionally, so respectfully. I've enjoyed every trip to Korea. I've learned something. I've always taken something back. Another inspiration that I can take back to Alaska as far as what we can do better and what we can do with our relationship, our ongoing relationship with Korea.